celebrate what was a real turning point in industrial struggles in the UK, and to remember those struggles, to bear in mind what came out of those struggles, and also to say that, you know, we have to put our foot down and say we have to carry on this fight for justice, just not for the miners, but for many other groups in our society that we're seeing day in, day out under me. We were going to hear first from Bob Crow, but since he's a little late, we're subsequently going to be entertained by Simon Weler. For those of you who don't know, Simon is the national organiser of ASLEF, a position that he's held for several years, and he's also a member of the TUC's General Council. Simon's a local Labour Party member here in Brighton and Hove, so we're very happy to have him here today. And I have to say, Simon's made a big effort coming here today because it is his mum's 75th birthday. So in gratitude to that, we have brought a little something for his mum. We hope Simon doesn't eat it before it gets to her. Anyway, that's enough from me. I'll give you Simon Weler.
I'm going to try and do this without a microphone, so if you can't hear me at the back there, just sort of shout out, because I find it very difficult with the microphone, because I start waving my arms about and then it's like I'm channeling Norman Collier. But very nice of you to mention my mother. Is that sort of any excuse to get out of a family gathering? Because and actually the family gathering thing's quite apposite, I suppose, because I was 17 when the miners' strike started. I hadn't started in full-time employment, and I've been to a number of these gatherings where people could quite rightly talk about the empowering part of the miners' strike and what it meant to their political consciousness as an individual, and how it, through their family, their fathers and their mothers have said this is an important thing, and it raised them. Well, again, say family gatherings. My experience of the miners' strike and my family was my dad in his Morris towel winding the window down going, "Starve, you bastards," and winding the window back up again. So perhaps that's a way of raising my political consciousness, when I've sometimes realised, well, parents are not always right. And I went to work for British Rail, and I became a train driver. And I've been a train driver for 20 years. And I've been the full-time, basically Deputy General Secretary of ASLEF for the last 6 or so years. And ASLEF has a proud history in its support with the miners and other trade unions, but particularly with the NUM. And in 1972, 1974, both the miners' strikes and ASLEF had supported them. And the way ASLEF supports the miners is quite simply by not moving any trains without coal and coke. Famously, during the miners' dispute, there was an entire train of coke just sat there. And it sat there for a year. They took the locomotive off it because they needed that for elsewhere, but it just sat in the sidings for an entire year, and at the end it was covered in posters, but that shows how solid they were. But the support went both ways. When ASLEF had its flexible rostering dispute in 1982, for those old enough to remember, the 2 weeks that the railway stopped running, the NUM donated £10,000, which in 1982 is a significant sum of money. Donated £10,000 to ASLEF, with a promise of a further £20,000 if it was needed. And in 1984, then the tables were turned, and it was time for ASLEF to support its brothers and sisters in the NUM. ASLEF's leadership at the time was Ray Buckton, and said, we are not to move any coal or coke. So from the end of February 1984, no ASLEF member moved any coal or coke. And shortly after that, the union imposed a levy on all its members, which at the time was 23,500. We're currently running at 20,000, but at the time we had 23,500. That was a 50 pence a week levy, which is quite a significant sum of money in 1984, because when I started in 1986, my wages were £72.40 a week. So and this then ran for the duration of the strike. And it was also then discovered that they were moving additional oil into the power stations. So all oil trains were stopped. So that we were attempting to cut off the movement, and so they'd have to rely on lorries. There was In June 1984, there was our annual conference, which was being held in London, and there was an NUN demonstration in London on the same day. So in solidarity, our national conference closed down for the day and went to join the miners. Now the police got involved, as was their wont in that time, and started arresting miners and started arresting ASLEF members. Two of the ASLEF members, one of whom later became an executive committee member, John Davis, they scurried off to Charing Cross, grabbed a couple of miners and said, just stand there, informed all the drivers running in out of Charing Cross that those couple of miners that stood there, that's a picket line. And we know what we do, we don't cross picket lines. Within 45 minutes, the entire London Underground network had ground to a halt, and the South Eastern suburban services all ground to a halt. And if we'd had enough miners, we could have probably done the south-western and the south-central sides of the southern region as well. Because there was this, quite a good tactic that had been known in other areas, where a couple of tailors' mannequins had been put on a bridge with a sign saying NUN picket, and suddenly all the trains stopped. So it was that support. It was that support. But the British Railways Board wasn't quite so supportive of ASLEF and its actions of stopping the coal trains and generally mucking up the southern region. And they would put a code on the pay slips, which meant that you were on strike. A number of our members got sent home for refusing to drive coal trains. And so when they got sent home, they didn't get paid. There would be whip rounds at the depot and everyone would make up their wages. Now, at some of the big coal depots, where their primary work was shifting coal and between pit and power station, that meant the entire depot would end up being sent home. So there was levies within ASLEF to make sure those freight drivers who only work coal trains, who were then going to be refusing to not work coal trains for the length of the miners' strike, would receive wages. So there was not only solidarity between ASLEF and the NUN, but there was solidarity between our own members. But the code on the payslip would show that the member was being shown as on strike rather than suspended or sent home. Well, that would have an impact on their benefits or their family allowance, because there would be various top-ups arrangements or housing benefit and things like that. If your payslip showed you were on strike, you lost your benefits, so you couldn't claim anything. So there was then a day's strike by ASLEF members nationally to protest against this, and this coding was quickly removed from some members' payslips. Many of our, what was I saying about the collections and the whip rounds, and this was this show of what trade unionism was all about. And we would also have raffles. There was some, and I forget which pit it was, but they'd been sent by the Serbian miners these tins of bean soup. And they were very, very common, these tins, but they were utterly, utterly dreadful. So
after a month.
So when the miners were on their uppers, they wouldn't eat the soup. Well, we ended up raffling. These become tokens of a way of making money. And Doncaster ASLEF branch quite proudly had this tin of Serbian bean soup dating, and they had it on a cabinet, and it was part of reminds the membership of what we did, our time to struggle and such like that. Well, then they moved offices, so they got put on another cupboard. But unfortunately, this was directly in the sun, and Yorkshire does get sun occasionally. And this bean soup got extremely hot and exploded in its tin, completely ruining the shop steward's office. But they were actually quite heartbroken that their tin of miners' bean soup had exploded. But it was it's little images like that was really useful for reminding people of what we did and what we went through, and how, as the rail unions were just as affected, as I said earlier, about the movement of the coal. And it's quite difficult to try and get that over to a new generation of trade unionists. Now, I'm not that old. And what we're seeing is the way that the railway is changing. We're having a new generation come in. And we're no longer having the kids starting at 16, 17, as I say, I started at 18. Where we're seeing people coming into the railway in their mid-30s, mid-40s, because the railway is now a reasonable paying job. And they don't come with that same background. They come from the way the management like to describe them as financially mature, which is what they mean is they're married, they've got kids and a mortgage and aren't going to muck about because there's got too much at risk. And it's trying to explain to these new people on the railway of what we did, what we went through, and what trade unionism was all about. Because although we've had, certainly train drivers are on better money and better conditions, we didn't get this out of the kindness of the employers' hearts. No, we used it quite simply through economic leverage. We actually went in and said, look, we want better money, we want better conditions, we want better, more secure jobs, and you're going to provide that. And in return, we'll provide you some trains. And it's getting the new generation to understand that struggle and understand that sticking together is how you make gains and how you achieve things. And that's why in some ways what was a tragic defeat can be used to remind the new generation of what we've got to do and how we can go about it. So, in conclusion, given I've just been given a bit of paper, although the 1984-85 dispute, miners' strike, didn't end well, but it's a part of our history that we should be proud of, because a lot of the trade unions stood shoulder to shoulder against the machine. And as the records that are coming out of the National Archive is showing that actually they were pretty bloody worried. And they were pulling out all the stops to defeat the workers. Well, we're still here, we're still standing, and we're still prepared to stand shoulder to shoulder. So, perhaps there's still some fight left in us yet. Thank you.